Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call, the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we welcome back in a new capacity, the one and only Grace Sharkey, but this time she is the Senior Manager of Communications and PR at Orderful, and she is joined by Blake Harries, the Senior Channel Manager from Orderful as well. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
So for today, we are getting into something that obviously everybody has to deal with, and that is the one and only beautiful EDI, also known as the bane of my existence at some point in time. But you know what? It's because I didn't have you guys on my side. I was just out here trying to talk to carriers and getting them to get their lives together, which, as we know, is a tall order. It's a tall order. Before we get too far into our main topic of the day today, let's get some background on you guys and how you both got started at Orderful. Blake, let's start with you.
Sure. I come from an interesting background. Most recently working at an e-commerce company, really focused on D2C, across order management, product inventory management. But again, really focused on direct to consumer. What the difference between, I think, Orderful and really how I've grown into this role here is focusing in on B2B and getting really prescriptive on a single thing that Orderful is really good at. And I've been here overseeing our strategic technology partnerships and looking to scale our relationships and customers as well.
I like that part. You have that kind of that unique background that slides itself nice inly. Because I feel like if you can do direct to consumer, you can handle a B2B no problem, because it's, arguably infinitely less complicated than a direct to consumer. Grace, we know you had some time here at FreightWaves. How'd you end up at Orderful?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I actually learned about Orderful years ago. It was one of the companies I actually wrote about because so many customers had reached out to me about their product. And as you know, I have this background in logistics, and I quite literally remember the day that we got a major account who wanted to give us a lot more business. And it was particularly, I think, during Hurricane Katrina. I was moving lumber and wood. But in order to connect to their system to get this mass amount of volume, we had to trade EDI right with them. And I'm talking like we're a medium-sized brokerage just growing with barely any tech people on our team. So I remember that feeling of being like, what even is EDI? Like, just let me book this truck, And so learning about the company, learning more about Eric and his leadership and what the company was doing, I totally understood the pain point. And I think having such a deep background in freight technology as well, it's the type of technology that you have to consider before you even start looking into integrating into other solutions, right? Like, how is your data flowing from all of your vendors and all of your partners? Because if you want to get into visibility tools or any other type of technology that needs your data, it needs to know the accurate data and what's happening now. And so that's what I thought was interesting. It was like, okay, this is the type of technology that's going to help other tech work in the space. So I met the team and of course met Blake and everyone else and had to join. Love the team at FreightWaves, always will till I die. But it was time for me to get out of the journalist seat and get back into the operations of what I've been writing about this whole time. And so I thought this was the perfect way to do that.
Well, I love it. As someone who also has a logistics background, I am all too familiar with the getting the raw EDI and counting the number of spaces over and what asterisk is it after and all of that. And then you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out why something's not mapping correctly. And then you're just sitting there counting rows, looking like an insane person trying to figure this out. And somebody's like, why do you care about that? And I'm like, because it's everything. So that being said, that ties itself nicely into life today. So for those that aren't, sitting there counting rows, counting lines, counting asterisks, how do you kind of explain why EDI is still important? Because I know now when you talk about kind of sharing data and everything like that, you have EDI, API, and I'm sure a whole bunch of other three-letter words that I have no idea what they are. But why is EDI still so important, especially when you have these like automatic API integrations as well?
Like, I'll let you take this from your point of view if you want to go for it.
Sure. Sure. So when I think about EDI, it's a standard, like you mentioned, that's the furthest thing from standard. And so I think when we talk about why EDI still matters is it's despite being an old technology, it is still the most universal way for businesses to communicate. And so it's a safe, reliable, and typically fast method for data transmission. But really, I guess kind of like elephant in the room is that it breaks a lot. And so it's something that is an incumbent. People are often not waking up thinking, today's the day I redo my EDI. It's usually when something breaks, that we're engaging with them. And so, I think it's going to continue to be a critical piece of technology, forever. I don't see it going anywhere.
I personally I never thought about EDI, like you said, until it broke. And then when it did break, it was just a really bad few days, not gonna lie. It's a real bad few days when it does break. So I guess, Grace, why, what typically is the root cause of like an EDI kind of failure? Is it just like, oops, we accidentally decided to change numbers of things? Or like what kind of problems does that cause for an organization when their EDI breaks?
Well, I think, yeah, it's a changing of those guidelines between different companies. I think that's a big one. And I think often, too, even outside of just breaking in the now, a lot of it's just the process of onboarding new clientele when you get them, right? It's like, once again, like Blake touched on this, it's the problem that you never see coming. And then when it comes, it's just like a really hard brick wall. I was talking to a very large 3PL owner a couple weeks ago about it, and it was funny because we were sitting with kind of a sales rep, and they look at it like when they get a customer who wants that connection fast, they kind of get nervous because they're like, well, I won the business like with my personality and what we have to offer as a company, but there's this like nice guardrail that if we can't connect quickly on time or be a good partner, right, like I could potentially lose it. And so that to me is a perfect example of a fail. And it's a fail that you didn't see happening outside of even just I mean, Blake's right? The disconnect and the breakdowns that can happen as well. I mean, once you start trading EDI, that will happen, right? And it's about your provider and how they're preventing that from happening, and how much control they have to help you through that process as well. And I think it's not only, the breakdown of before it's happening, but even afterwards, as you start adding more partners, that's the frequency of that happening could potentially get bigger and bigger. So, it's a lot of times, we always talk about like in this on this show how people like want to build their own TMS, and we kind of laugh because it's like that sounds good until all of a sudden you start seeing all of the money that you put into like house that data and like actually being a tech company. It's the same problem here, right? Like you get a number of EDI partners, and that problem of constant breakdown is going to happen. It's just the technology. But are you working with a partner like Orderful who's continuing to innovate how we solve those problems, watch for those problems, and use the APIs like you talked about, more modern tech to avoid those issues? I think that's what's great too. So yeah, there's a number of different ways it can break down, and like Blake kind of touched on, it's almost inevitable at this point.
Right. When you think about the way that, the the system of EDI historically has been set up, it's prone, like you mentioned, prone for failure. There's an eminent human error. There's manual integration work that's being done, and point code that's being written, hosted, maintained. I mean, there's written for errors. Um, Without a doubt. And I think there's a cost associated too, like you mentioned, Grace, that using outdated tech, and even more, on a revenue perspective, if, like you said, you're unable to go live with that trading partner, that's revenue your business can't capture. And it's because you're not able to connect as quickly as you'd like to.
So I guess how do you know if you're like a medium-sized shipper or a brokerage or whatever, if you're sitting there and you're getting these requests to say, hey, like we want to integrate with you, we want to work with you, it's going to be fantastic, but we need to move quickly. And if that's something that you're looking at like, okay, that's like half the time that I need to get this done, this seems completely unreasonable. But then at the same time, they're like, well, we have others that can do this. And if you can't meet this, then that's going to be a problem. When do you kind of know as a provider or as like a service provider, when do you know that, okay, maybe we might be in out over our heads a little bit? And when do we need to start actually reaching out? Because I think a lot of people get stuck if like, oh, I have a legacy system or I have all of this homegrown buffoonery, because I'm going to call it buffoonery if we're being honest. I have all of this homegrown buffoonery. I can't use something that's like kind of cutting edge and technologically savvy. Like I can't do that. I have old spaghetti code. Like how do you even begin to start this conversation to look for a partner? And is there a partner out there that can help you kind of get things up to speed? Blake, I'll let you start this one.
Yeah. Sure, sure. So I think the biggest, we talked about earlier how people aren't, waking up and deciding that today's the day I'm going to redo my EDI, but there's often a change signal or, a pain point that's really driving the exploration or, evaluation of an alternative solution. And those things can be as simple as visibility, right? I have no visibility into my EDI program. You called it buffoonery, right? I have to reach out to somebody. I'm not able to trade with who I want to, and I don't really know why. That's one one major reason. So a lack of end-to-end visibility across an EDI program. Another thing being expansion, right? So this could be driven by a retail relationship. A brand might be looking to expand their wholesale business, and they've secured, like Grace alluded to earlier, a net new relationship, maybe with Target or Walmart, and they're super excited. But again, the manual processes, the cost to stand up that integration and maintain it does not outweigh, the benefit afforded. And then lastly, I think the speed at which errors are resolved. So there's this concept of chargebacks in EDI where if you send invalid data or, data with errors in it to your trading partner during the testing cycle, they'll hit you with a fee for wasting their time and sending them something that, was invalid or not to their specs. So oftentimes we have folks coming to us with a backlog of trading partners, meaning they've engaged in these new relationships but can't get them live, or they're experiencing exorbitant costs and they can't really delineate where those are going or why. And then lastly, outdated systems. So you're experiencing errors. There's long lead times to resolve those, and you're not really able to move at the pace that you'd like.
And I guess if you're sitting there and you are kind of, because what I've seen firsthand is typically when you're trying to manage everything yourself, you're having a lot more errors. It's taking you a lot longer. You're getting frustrated with your partners because depending on who you talk to on the other end of that integration, they could be competent or they could also not be competent. And so you're left sitting there running around in circles or you're just left on red. Like there's many times where we've had to like go to LinkedIn and find like the director of IT solutions and be like, "Hi, no one will help us with this." And they're just like, "That's unreasonable." And then the solution's done in 5 minutes. I shouldn't have to stalk people on LinkedIn for this to happen. So I guess what are some of those red flags that people should see or when they see to say, hey, maybe we don't need to wait for something to break. We might need to start shopping for a new vendor or look for some others, look for literally anything else that's better than this. Like, what are some of those red flags that people would see? Grace, I'll let you start this one.
Yeah, I'll touch on this a little bit and then I'll let Blake kind of showcase some of what she's seen in the past. But it's interesting just, talking to some of our onboarding team and that's a big part of this problem, right? Is like EDI is also not just the technology, but right, that physically connects it. But so part of that slow process is, communicating back and forth with trading partners. So I will say, and this is actually a topic that came up on our first podcast episode, which you guys can all check out. By the time this airs, it should be on YouTube as well, but you can see it on our LinkedIn page. Eric and I did discuss how, part of our onboarding team and our just customer service team, we use AI to make sure that we're communicating quite frequently with those partners. If there is that slowdown, that there's some type of action that's happening, and make sure that picks up faster. And a lot of the work right now as we're growing too is building those connections, working closer with some of these larger retails like Walmart, like Target, like Kohl's, for example, and building such a close relationship that we currently have, where we can avoid some of that delay that I'm sure people have experienced even when they choose an EDI provider. So I love that you asked that question, because I think that's something that often comes up to people like Blake and our onboarding team, because they know, okay, yeah, as great as the technology can be, what is your team doing in the background to make sure that the partners we're working with are making sure this happens? Blake, do you want to kind of expand on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that you mentioned the human intervention or the human interaction that has to take place, but what Orderful has done is really try to minimize that. So our onboarding team is solely focused on certifying guidelines, expanding our network, building relationships with those trading partners so that we can get quick responses. We do have good rapport, and they're willing to handle queries in a timely manner. I would also say that I think it comes down to like a damaged reputation with the company and the retailer themselves. There's a lot in a reputation, and you said, like, you hit on it, right? You only get one shot. So if you mess it up, then there probably isn't going to be another Walmart down the line that you're able to onboard with. So there's consequences for things like missed POs or fines associated with chargebacks, and ultimately it's hindering the company's growth.
So I guess something that you've mentioned a few times is, growth and everything through integrations with EDI. Because there's something that is often perceived, or at least in my opinion, I see it perceived as kind of EDIs. I'm not going to say it's like old technology, but it's not like the cutting edge. It's not the new hotness on the block, right? But it's still something that's very important, very crucial, and it's something that everybody uses every day. So for that to be considered like old technology, I'm like, you guys will use it every day. Like, come on. But how can you still utilize strong EDI integrations and making sure that, everything is working flawlessly for hopefully ever? How can you kind of leverage that into part of your growth strategy as an organization? Blake, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Let me think about that for a second. As a growth strategy, I think if you can approach EDI in a repeatable way, which is what Orderful has tried to do to simplify the integrations and to make them more digestible from a consumer standpoint, I guess. And I think that really is like what Orderful is built upon and is doing, right? We've taken that concept of a point-to-point integration and flipped it on its head. So just by nature, we're infinitely simpler. We integrate once per document type. So take a one-to-many approach where, through that single integration, you can onboard 5, 10, 100 trading partners without ever actually needing to go back to that integration work itself. So that's really the powerful piece.
The part I'll add too, because it's funny, we get it a lot just writing at FreightWaves. I'm sure, Mary, you're going to see this too, is that EDI versus API conversation. And it's interesting because I like to compare it to email versus direct message. We still use email. Like, as much as we love Slack, we still for sure use email. Do we answer every email? That's something, but it's still there, and it still has to be there for business. And I kind of look at EDI in that same way. Like, there's no getting rid of EDI. There's large organizations that have built their operations around it. It's just not happening. So that's why we've taken this more modern approach, or we've used API to make EDI better. And to Blake's point too, I think that we've, a big part of our customers is like these fast growing brands, right? And we offer even our web EDI experience that allows like those brands who just have a couple of trading partners to even go and make those connections themselves. You can check out our web EDI product, and you could get connected very quickly with your first trading partner. And I think that's how we look at it as a business is like, okay, and especially in this environment with tariffs and everything, if you're a small brand and a growing brand and all of a sudden Walmart says yes to you, you want to be sure that that system you're using is going to adhere to the old technology that Walmart's using through a new approach. Will say, a perfect example, I had a conversation with Faraday's team, which is one of our customers, the big, fast-growing uh, uh, t-shirts, whatever, clothing brand. And she was really fun to talk to because she doesn't look at herself as like a technologist. I write about tech. I don't think I'm a technologist, right? I feel the same way as her. But like, it's almost like how Mary, you and I feel about like Canva, right? Like it makes me feel like I'm a graphic designer. And it was the same way for her. She's like, I'm a tech girl now, you know? And she can build out and continue to help Verity grow with a technology that she like doesn't fully understand. And that's like, I think what's cool is like maybe making that mapping, which we'll have some really cool product stuff coming around the line on that, but making that mapping so simple that literally someone who doesn't even know what EDI stands for can probably figure it out.
I really like that approach too, because that means it's more accessible and it's less daunting, like it's less, oh, I have to have a coding background, I have to have this, I have to have that. So we have a few minutes left before we get to our favorite question of the day. I have a quick question for both of you, and that is kind of, where do you see the future of AI, of not of AI, of EDI? Too many letters. Where do you see the future of EDI, maybe in the next 3 to 5 years? Do you see it kind of playing the same role, or do you see it doing something else? Grace, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that we'll eventually, through AI, and I honestly, I think with the tools that we're building here today, we'll just get to a point where everything's almost pre-connected. And it's just like opening up these streams of data for individuals. And honestly, something that we're looking at as a company long term as well is, okay, now that we've opened up these pipes and we've made it so easy for customers, what can we now do with all this data? So not only like pre-connecting everything and making it so easy, but helping our customers also see what their data can do. I don't know if you know this, Mary, but we are actually a partner of Sonar's. A lot of our data helps power Sonar too. So, right. So using that kind of same concept, I think is what more can we offer once we make this pre-connection so simple.
And then Blake, what do you see for the future?
I would say our tagline, right? We have it all over our website. You can check it out. The idea is you can integrate with Orderful in 9 days or less. Our goal is to bring that down to 9 hours to 9 minutes, right? Like as simple as clicking a button, following a workflow, and onboarding your trading partner is like really as like a visionary kind of like where we want to be.
Yeah. I actually like that spot because you don't want to be like, oh, we're gonna have to do this and it's gonna take 6 months. If we can just get it done really quick, 10s across the boards. All right. Speaking of 10 across the board, it is time for arguably the best question of the day. And that is going to be, if you could build a house out of any food, what would you choose? I will let you decide who gets to go first.
I'll go first. Just because I'm a part of the Panera Sip Club because I get their coffee every morning and that's pretty much it. I'm going to say 30-minute-old cut Panera bagels because those things, once you cut them, have the smallest shelf life of all time. You could literally kill someone by throwing it at a minimal speed. So my house would be, I would stack them like bricks. So that could kind of be like a cool look, but that would be mine. And they have to be cut because then they dry out so fast. The moment you cut that thing, it's over. So yeah, dried, cut up Panera bagels.
That's hilarious.
I love that so much.
I took a little bit of a different approach with my answer. I have been admittedly obsessed with Uncrustables recently. And I know, call me, it's like I'm this old. I found out about them a few weeks ago. Can't stop eating them. But I would argue that would be a very effective building material. You could build them frozen. You could even open them up and use like the peanut butter and jelly as glue. And then they'd be weatherproof. They'll just thaw and be good. You could eat them for dinner. You build your house in the morning and you could eat them for dinner.
I love that.
I like that a lot. That is a really good one. Okay, so if anyone has any questions on, maybe the best floor plan for a bread, for a bagel, or a uncrustable house, or if they have any question about what we've talked about today, where can they find you guys outside the show?
I would say you can probably email Blake, right, at blake@orderful.com. That's probably the easiest. Or check out our website. Go to orderful.com. We have wonderful case studies, a lot of content you guys can check out. Again, we have a podcast that just dropped, and we'll have some wonderful guests on there too. Working on having your Strickland actually join us too, so that will be fun. But yeah, go check us out and follow us on LinkedIn so you can get updates to everything we have going on.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mary.
You can find Check Call the Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows, and don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.